Are you a successful IT professional and need help optimizing your compensation plan, navigating your taxes, investments, and protection? It's time to rewire and retire with Mike. Listen in as Mike gets you the answers you need to move forward. Now, on to the show with Mike.
Hello and welcome to Rewire and Retire with Mike Guarino. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm well, Eric. How are you?
Doing fantastic. We spoke a little bit about the work that I did this weekend. I built a fire pit in my backyard and burned a lot of things. And I thought about, maybe I should just burn all my clothes, right? This COVID stuff, you just never can be too safe. But then I thought, it's probably a bad idea, So anyway,
I power washed this weekend, and maybe I should have put my clothes out there and just power washed those when I had them out there.
See, we got some good ideas. I think we could, patent some. Well, never mind. Anyway, we didn't come here to talk about fire pits and power washing, although that would make a great podcast, I'll tell you. What are we talking about today?
Hey, starting a mini-series today, a 5-part mini-series about the benefits of financial planning.
Okay, 5-part mini-series about the benefits of financial planning. Mm-hmm. All right, so we have enough content to do 5 full parts. I'm not the expert here, Mike. You are.
Yes.
And you're saying we got enough for 5 podcasts.
Yeah, so it's all right. So I just want to differentiate a couple things. Yeah, there's 5 weeks I plan on doing this, and two kind of bullet points every week of the benefits of planning. But what I want to start with, Eric, is, the 5 steps of financial planning. Just get this out of the way first, because this is like the table of contents, if you will. And then the mini series is kind of going to go more granular on each and the benefits. So as advisors, we always encourage financial planning, at least we do here at Guarino Wealth Management, because you really can't, the big thing, what we have to do as advisors, and clients don't know this because they're clients or prospects. When we meet with you and start asking you lots and lots of questions, it's for your benefit for a variety of reasons. But number one is to make sure that we're a good fit, personally, that we get along. And number two is really to make sure I understand your situation, because everybody's different. Everything is different.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important as advisors, we have to do a thing called KYC, know your customer, know your client. Mm-hmm. And that's super, super important. So when people sit down with us the first time face to face, or, now with Zoom and everything in the event of the new norm, we drill down with questions. And sometimes people be like, why are you asking me so many questions? It's like, because I need to have an intimate knowledge of your finances and you, A, to see if I can help you. And B, I want to make sure I'm presenting the right things to you. Mm-hmm. Right. So here's how the steps of financial planning work. Number one is defining a relationship. And that's kind of what I just talked about, knowing them, asking them questions. It's a dialogue. It's not an interrogation, right? So it's a back and forth, making sure that we both agree on their financial objectives and goals. So that's step one. Establish a relationship and kind of etch out roughly what your financial objectives and goals are. Step two is like when we're going to ask you for the information, right? Like, okay, you told me this and this, Mr. and Mrs. Client, let's talk about, getting the information. I need your social security statements. I need, your last couple of years of tax returns, all the stuff that we ask for, statements, any bank accounts, any checking accounts, any investment accounts, your current portfolio, all that stuff to gather the information. Third step, analyzing all that data. That's on me, right? So let's say you did it with me, Eric, right? You sat down, we established our relationship. We talked about power washing and building fire pits. And okay, hey, these are my goals, Mike. I want to retire in the Smoky Mountains and ride quads the rest of my life. Okay, great. And I've gathered all your data. Now, step 3, I leave you alone. This is where I go, behind the curtain, and I'm just, pushing buttons and pulling levers and entering all the data into, our sophisticated software. Then I come to you with a presentation. So that's step 4. I present the data to you. Eric, you told me this, and this about yourself. I've gotten all the documentation that I needed from you. I've analyzed it. I've put it into my system, and here's our first crack at it. Here's what it looks like. And then you say, Mike, okay, it needs some fine tuning here or there, or, I'd rather retire at 63 than 65. Okay, fine. So I'll make those adjustments. And then step 5, after step 4 is complete, we implement that plan. Mm-hmm. And implement just means, okay, Mike, here's implementation of it. What does that mean? Eric, this is what it means. Your investments, your insurances, all this other stuff is lined up with what you told me. And now we're just going to cut it loose for a while, and we'll probably revisit it once a year, right? Most people, we look at their plans once a year. So that's the steps of financial planning: defining your goals with your advisor, gathering all the data. The advisor analyzes the data. Step 4 is development and presentation of it. And step 5 is implementation. So those are the steps of financial planning. That's not the mini series. The mini series is, okay, I've done all that, Mike. What are the benefits of it? What do I get out of it?
Gotcha.
And that's what we're going to drill down on now.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about this on previous podcasts. One of the things that I absolutely love is the fact that you kind of said that I pull the levers and push the buttons and all that jazz. The nice thing is those levers and buttons are always there. Those levers and buttons are always adjustable. And so we've talked about, just like you said, I want to retire at 63 instead of 65. Okay, well, let's see what that looks like. And those conversations that you're having with your clients once a year, I know because of our private conversations that you've done it more than once a year as well, because it's, life events happen and your clients give you a call and you check in with your clients. It's not that you're only talking to them once a year. It's that, how are things going? You're checking in. You may have deeper conversations once a year, but you're also monitoring what's going on in their life. Oh, your daughter's pregnant. Fantastic. That's exciting. So you're going to have a grandbaby, and then we need to look at how is that going to change, your financial picture and all that. So I'm excited to get into this because I know that there are a ton of benefits. I was a little tongue in cheek earlier going, do we have enough for 5 podcasts? I know we do, because you and I've talked about this a lot. And I think you said you had 10 points, right? So we're going to do 2 points each podcast?
Exactly.
All right, let's dive in.
Yeah, and I want to back up real quick. Implementation, like you were just talking about, right? And making adjustments to scenarios, retiring at 65 or 63, right? We monitor the financial plan. So you're right. We're going to talk to you a bunch of times throughout the year, but monitoring the plan, we're definitely going to sit down at least once a year to make sure that, like you just said, your goals and things like that haven't changed. So it's not just implementation of the plan. Step 5 is really implementation and monitoring the plan, making sure we're on track. So let's kick it off. So the 5-part mini series, and again, this is not promissory. This is what we as advisors know or planners know are important. And step number 1, it's easy peasy. A financial plan can help you define your financial goals. I'd like to say will there, but we can't be promising anything. It can help you define your financial goals.
Exactly.
So, most financial planners, begin by asking you, what your goals are, right? Couples sometimes doing, things, alone. Like, so for example, you and your wife, she might be doing the budgeting and the bills, but you might be the guy talking about investments, right? So when you work with an advisor or a planner, he's going to pull both of those in together and say, okay, I get it. I see how your relationship works. You pay the bills and do the budgeting, and Eric goes out and spends all the... No, I'm kidding.
Wait a second. Have you been looking at my expenses? Go ahead.
Yeah, no. And Eric is the guy that's more keyed into the markets and the investments, right? So when we pull those 2 channels in, this really is, and a lot of times it's the first time couples are really talking about this together. So you see a cool dynamic here, and you kind of like, I key up on it right away. Who's the saver, who's the spender, and sometimes they're not opposite ends of the spectrum. So there's a lot of different mixes and matches. You know what I mean? It's unusual that you get 2 people that see it eye to eye. But anyway, we pull in both sides. So now I'm having a conversation with you and your wife, and we're talking about, she's paying bills and budgeting and you're investing. Okay, well, how does this tie into what you're trying to do? What are we trying to do? Well, Mike, we just, our oldest is ready to go to college and we're just about to tap into the 529 plan. Our mortgage only has, 5 more years left on it. So we find out all this relevant data, and talk about the goals. And there's 3 things to mention here. There's goals, there's wants, and there's wishes, right? A goal, simply, I want to retire at 65. Okay, that's a goal. That's an easy one. A want, Mike, I think I want to move to North Carolina when I finally get out of New Jersey. Okay, fine. That's a want. A wish is a little bit different than both of those. A wish is like, hey, what'd be really cool? Having a big boat in my backyard when I move to North Carolina. So,
oh yeah,
yeah, right. So why wouldn't you?
boats are better in the water, but that's just me.
No, I'm with you on that. And that's the thing, right? So there's goals, wishes, and wants, and that's where an advisor kind of differentiates in all them. And somebody say, "Wow, I never thought of it like that. I thought like a goal was a boat, a goal was moving to North Carolina, and a goal was, having enough to retire at age 65." And I'm like, well, we really got to compartmentalize those a little bit more. And again, we focus on goals, we focus on wants and we focus on wishes, but the primary focus is goals, right? Let's get to the retirement first, Eric. Then we'll get you moved, and then we'll build your boat, right? Mm-hmm. So just by putting those in order gives people clarity. Suddenly they're like, I get it. I see the difference between the three of them. So that would be the first step of the mini series, and the second one, kind of simply jumping ahead to the next point. It helps you see if what you want is realistic for your timeline, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could be 60 and say to me, Mike, all those things we just mentioned, I want to retire at 65. I want the house in North Carolina, and I want the big boat in the backyard. Goal, wish, want, right? Here's the thing. Does it work on your timeline? You have 5 years to go. It's never going to happen. Well, what do? Let's look at it. Now we have all this information, all this data inside a financial plan. Now we can do what's called a scenario. What does it look like if I retire at 65? And again, there's a lot of assumptions made in planning. That's the only way we can do it. But once we have all that concrete information in the system, we can manipulate it on a customized level. And I can show you, okay, Eric, 65 doesn't really work, but how about 67? That looks really good. Those numbers are solid at 67. Just 2 more years working. You might want to choke me. Be like, what are you talking about? Or I can say, okay, if we retire at 65, let's go with a smaller house in North Carolina, or a smaller boat, or no boat. Mm-hmm. So there's always options, and that's why it's critical to define needs, wishes, and wants separately, so we know which ones to achieve first. It's like baking the cake, putting the icing on the cake. The cake is, I want to retire. Okay, the icing and all the decorations are, it'd be nice to move to North Carolina, but I kind of don't have to. And you definitely don't need the boat. So those are the 2 points I really want to talk about today.
Yeah, and here's the thing, is I love that entire picture, because you gave those 3 scenarios, and you're really close on my perfect retirement. It's retirement, it's South Carolina, not North Carolina, and it's definitely the boat. Again, we were in South Carolina, Mike, and my buddy lives there, and we've been friends forever, since I think 2nd grade. And while we were there, he hired a guy, and it's not Uber, but it's a service like that. It's like you just find them online. They're like, hey, you can rent me and my boat for a couple hours, and I'll take you out and do this, that, and the other. And it was fantastic. It was a smaller boat. I think it fit like 8 people total. It was more made for fishing, which is just right up my alley. But we all got in there, and we're in these canals, and there's dolphins. And then he took us to the small island, and he dropped us off. He's like, you know what? I'm going to park. We'll drop you all off. You guys can kind of comb the island for seashells and do whatever for an hour or so. And then I'll swing back by, and we'll go out for another ride. And it was absolutely gorgeous. And so again, looking at what do I want? Well, that would be pretty much ideal. And then, like you said, I can adjust the size of the boat depending on how that goal is coming. Now, the retirement, I'm firm on where I'm going to, the age that I'm going to be able to retire at. You and I've talked about it. The house that I live at, it may not be directly on the beach, but it's going to be close. And how close really depends on, how well I've done, over the years of saving and everything else. So now I've got that kind of established, then we come to the boat, right? Either my boat has oars or it has a motor. It can fit 2 people, 6 people, 8 people. Bottom line is I'm in the location I want. I'm near the water. I've got almost everything I want. And it just all depends on how things can be fudged here and there throughout my timeline. And I just love that visual. I love that work that you do because, again, it really gives your clients a picture of what could be and kind of what they need to do to get there.
So let me ask you a couple questions. When you were out on this boat fishing and he dropped you off on the beach to collect shells and stuff, how often did you think about work, your portfolio, the stock market? How many times did that go through your brain?
Not a single time. The only thing going through my brain was just walking on that beautiful beach and then seeing a shark next to my leg. A very small, it was a bonnet shark. I'd never experienced it because bonnet sharks kind of look like hammerheads, but not quite. Mm-hmm. And it was small, but it was just curious. But I jumped. I'll be honest. My right leg came up out of the water higher than I've ever probably kicked in my life. I was like, yeah. But no, didn't think about that one time. Just enjoyed the time with my friends and family and the kids, and it was gorgeous.
Right. And that's what I tell my clients. And I say this sincerely when I talk to them and on the phone and when I meet with them. I'm like, listen, let me do the worrying for you. I'm watching this stuff. I got this. Mm-hmm. You go live your life. Do what you want to do. Right. I'll call you when it's time to worry. If you don't ever hear the phone ring, that's a great thing. You're going to hear me check in, say, hey, Eric, it's Mike, just checking in. I know you were going to South Carolina and hanging out with your buddy on the boat. Just when you get a chance, circle back with me. I want to know how that went. Click, that's it. Mm-hmm. That's not me calling you saying, hey, time to cut the boat in half and sell half of it because the market tanked. Mm-hmm. That's the time to worry. Those are the calls that all advisors hate to give, but we got to prepare our clients too. But where I'm going with this is while you were away, on vacation in South Carolina, collecting shells, fishing, jumping away from sharks, you weren't thinking about your portfolio. You weren't thinking about your financial plan. You weren't thinking about the markets. And that's what's so great about outsourcing this stuff to people, right? Let them worry about it. If Mike has my back, he's going to call me if I have to do anything differently than I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. The other thing too, Eric, that's kind of overlooked or neglected as advisors, we give advice. Right? So you're calling me saying, hey, Mike, I want to buy this, 28-foot Sea Ray, or a Grady White. I want a fishing boat, all rigged out, Well, how much are they? Well, the one I'm looking at's like $200,000. I would say, Eric, you've heard the expression, what does BOAT stand for? Break out another 1,000, right? There's never anything under $1,000 to do on a boat, right? It's always 1,000 or more. Mm-hmm. From maintenance to fixing it to just keeping it up and running. And I would say, hey, have you ever thought about joining a fishing club? For a couple $1,000 a year, you can go out a bunch of times and kind of maybe scratch that fishing itch. And you don't have the burden or the layout for a boat, the maintenance, the upkeep, the thousands of dollars that we're talking about that you have to throw into it. So advisors are really good at giving people advice because we've retired so many people. And we've kind of worked with people from the time they're young adults to the time they're, 65 and wanting to retire to South Carolina. We've worked with those people and we know what works for those people. And we can give really sound advice based on our experiences of working with people who've retired. Don't buy the boat. I know you kind of feel like you have to right now, but just kick that can down the road. Join a fishing club. Find a friend with a boat for a little while. See what it's like. Maybe the fishing stinks back behind your house. Those are the things like wait. And we can give advice on a lot of things. And again, I would love to be the guy to say, do it all. Retire at 62 or 3, go to South Carolina, get the boat, fish, collect shells, stay away from sharks, do all those wonderful things. But, and if your plan permits it, if I know that it's not going to impede retirement down the road or staying retired down the road, then do it. We could do all those things. Yeah. So, the big one, we're picking on this, but the boats, that's the one thing I say, I know you want this boat. I know you've thought about it for 20 years. Wait. Let's just get retired. Let's get situated. Let's see what it's like before we go pull a $200,000 trigger, Yeah. So advice is extremely important. You have to have confidence in the person that you're working with. How many people have they retired? Where are those people living? And what can the advisor bring to the table as far as advice goes?
Yeah. Here's the other thing is that, yes, we focused on the boat and I'm sure you've heard this as well. What are the 2 best days in a boat owner's life? The day he buys the boat and the day they sell it. Yeah. Right. So here's the thing.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. My family's owned some boats and I would agree with that statement in certain ways, but the boat analogy translates to so many things. Here's another thing that people just really get hung up on is I want a vacation property. Great. And maybe you're living in South Carolina, but you want a vacation property in Florida or you want a vacation property in Arizona. So you've got one water, one land. Do you really want to pull the trigger on buying a home or a vacation property, as you would call it, or a second home in a location that you're only going to be there for 4 months or 6 months out of the year. And then you have to deal with the security, the maintenance, the everything else. When you can Airbnb something, and I'm not plugging one company specifically, but we know what the world looks like today compared to what it looked like a decade ago. You can go and rent a place, a beautiful home for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then you're only paying for 3 months, right? You're not paying every month for an entire year for decades. And even having to worry about security and everything else. You know, what's happening while I'm not at that property? That's a scary thing. Again, you've said it before on this podcast. How much would you pay to have a great night's sleep every night of your life? And those are the little things. If you can eliminate the worry about, you know, what's happening in a property that you're not at for 6 months and all the problems you're going to face when you get there, you know, to open it up for the year, for crying out loud. There's so many other options. And so I love the fact that you're having those discussions and saying, well, have you thought about this? And you can only do that when you've gained the experience that you and your team have. And truly, again, how many people have you retired? I'm only going to go through retirement once. You're going through it all the time, you know, with your clients. So no, I think that's great.
That's a good point. And like we talked about, you know, step one of this mini-series was defining your goals. Well, that's pretty easy when we talked about needs, wishes, and wants. Okay, fine. Step two, which we're really diving deep on, which I'm glad because it's an important one. You know, are your goals realistic, right? Is the 28-foot Grady realistic, or is it, you know, an 18-foot kayak, right? So that's the thing. Like, there's the realistic part of goals. You know, some are very lofty, and you know, we have to peel it back. And again, you can't step on anybody's toes, because the last thing you want to do is tell somebody who's worked their whole life and, you know, done the right things. They've disciplined themselves. They've saved. You know, they paid for their kids' colleges, and they paid off the house or paying off the house. You know, they're thinking about the vacation property to buy, and they're thinking about the boat to buy. And I'm going to go burst that bubble? No. I'm going to just show them alternatives, right? Like, you know, if the plan doesn't warrant doing all those things, you might have done a wonderful job saving way beyond what you're ever going to spend in retirement. And I'm not going to be the guy to harsh that mellow, right? I'm not going to jump in there and say, oh, you can't get the Grady. No, I'm not going to say that. You can't get the boat. You can't get this. I'm going to bring up the fact that, hey, look, you can do this. Do you want to do it? Right? Just because who's really validating their decisions? I mean, I know the husband and wife are having conversations and talking about, you know, whether they want the boat or the house or this, but who's validating that? And sometimes they just need a third person to give them an objective opinion based on an intimate knowledge of their finances. And, you know, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, let it rip. You've worked hard. I know this boat and this house mean a lot to you. You can afford it. To someone who might not be in that position, the conversation might go like, hey, you know, you've done a great job saving and you've definitely earned it. I'm just worried that the $200,000 boat's a little bit of a bigger bite of the apple than we want to take in your first year of retirement. You know, can you delay that a little bit or see, you know, how it looks once you get down there? Do you really need it? And then, you know, you kind of get down that path and they'll pick up on it. They'll go, why? What are you worried about? And I'm like, you know, 200,000 is a lot. You know, I get you like the boat. And then we get into all sorts of permutations of that conversation. Maybe renting a boat, joining a fishing club, whatever you want. Here's alternatives. And yeah, I am worried about your retirement. I'm not really worried about your fishing boat, right? So I gotta, you know, you gotta find that balance there. Because again, you never want to harsh anybody's mellow. You don't want to crush their goals or their, you know, their wants, but you have to keep them focused, right? And that to me is what an advisor really does well. Let's stay focused on the goals and sprinkle in the wants and wishes where we can, if we can afford it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, this has been a fantastic part one. I know that this is going to be a 5-part series, but I also know that you want to end every podcast with something a little special. So why don't you remind us again what we're going to do now?
We're going to look into the crystal ball that I have here.
Nice. And so that's my cue. I get to ask you the question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here it is. What do you see in your crystal ball?
Ooh, I see... It's very foggy today. Can you do that again?
Sure, I can do it one more time.
I see.
Shake it.
Suddenly it's clearer.
Oh, good.
I see uncertainty in the markets. That's what I see.
What does that mean?
Okay, thanks for asking. What does it mean? Well, today the market is exuberant on the likelihood that there will be some sort of vaccine or treatment for COVID-19. The market's up, I don't know, a lot of points, 700-800 as we're speaking right now.
Okay.
Uncertainty, clinical trials, FDA approval, all the things that come along with any new drug, trying to get through the pipeline. If it fails, I think the market retreats. So I think we just we're living by the headline and less than the fundamentals. And in my last crystal ball, I said, I see, pain and hardship coming to the markets. And here it is, 800 points up. What I really mean by uncertainty is the market has been phenomenal at shrugging off bad news that I think is coming. I mean, second quarter earnings are not going to be pretty. We basically shut the world down for 8 or more weeks, right smack dab in the middle of the second quarter. I don't see how earnings are good. Look, I'm the first guy to tell you I'm super excited that the market's up as high as it is, and I hope it sticks. But again, I'm a fundamentals guy, and I worry about when earnings and GDP numbers and unemployment and employment figures start coming in, that we might be over our skis a little bit right now.
No, that makes sense, and I appreciate you being the guy that says, you know what, I'm going to be the more conservative one here, and I'm going to be the more cautious one here in what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking, because again, I think there's too many people out there that are either just straight, hey, this is the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you in your entire life, and then there's the people that are like, everything's going to be fine, which I don't know why those people do that. Besides, They want to sell commercials, of course, because they're part of news stations.
Exactly.
And you're not here to sell anything. You're here just to really educate people, give people good advice, and really show them that there is a better way to plan and plan for uncertain markets, plan for a great boat or a great vacation home. Who knows?
Right. And to be cliche for a moment, everybody's probably heard this, but if you fail to plan, you've planned to fail. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I'll tell you this, the market's gone through a lot in 2020, ups, downs, sideways, you name it. We've seen it. And one of the most rapid declines in the history of the stock market that we had a couple weeks ago. It didn't give anybody time to prepare for anything. But what I will tell you is my planning clients versus my investing clients, guess who I heard from way more on, because we keep track of this stuff, who we're hearing from during this financial crisis, we'll call it. Who called more, the financial planning clients or the investing clients?
The investing clients.
Of course, because they're just looking at returns. Yep. And we've said this before on podcasts, Eric, and I'll close with this. When you have a financial plan, you measure results. When you're just investing, you're measuring performance. And I cannot tell you the dichotomy between those two. It's a mindset. And that's what Rewire and Retire is. It's a mindset. Change the way you're thinking about your investments. Start with planning because you'll be measuring your results. You won't be looking at the performance every day. If I can leave us with one thing to think about between now and the next podcast, is exactly that. Are you chasing performance or are you planning for the future and measuring results?
That's right. And I'll leave it at that too. I'm just going to tell the audience one thing. Listen to part 2. This is part 1. Tune in for part 2. And the way you do that is you subscribe to the podcast, which is the button at the bottom of the page there. Click the subscribe button. And then when Mike comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device right there, right when he releases it. And so again, I want to thank you for listening to the Rewire and Retire podcast with Mike Guarino from Guarino Wealth Management. Thank you so much. This is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Rewire and Retire podcast. If you want to learn more about how we can help troubleshoot your financial and retirement strategies, click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Guarino Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member FINRA/SIPC.